Wow. Wow. Welcome back to the Glenarden Talks podcast. Little emergency section. It's only going to be 15-20 minutes. It's going to be brief. I'm rocking solo today. Cerule's preparing for some wrestling matches. And he didn't have the time to get here, but I thought, why not make an emergency section on what's going on today in the news? I felt that it was necessary to talk about, so here we go. Sorry about the delays real quick. Sorry about the delays by episode 6. I was exposed to COVID, someone who had COVID. I never got it. I had to quarantine for 2 weeks, and then Cerule was getting ready for his wrestling matches and stuff like that. So a little bit of a delay, but I'm good now. I'm out of quarantine. We're going to be trying to get that episode out as soon as possible. Enough about that stuff. Let's get right into what, if you looked at the video, why we're here. So, today, in the news, Democrats are pushing legislation to expand the court. So, I thought, why not talk about it? Let's bring up a brief history about the courts, and then we'll try and tackle this as apolitical as possible. So, history of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was made March 4th, 1789. The job of the Supreme Court is to make sure that laws are passed constitutional and fairly to all people. Their main focus is to defend the Constitution. They're supposed to be an apolitical body, apolitical. They're not supposed to have any political affiliation with any party necessary. And that is how do I describe this? It's necessary for the Supreme Court to be apolitical because if they favor a party, that can severely impact the laws that are passed and the laws that are not passed. So, brief little history lesson, Alexander Hamilton, he was a very significant, prominent figure in American history, and he wrote these papers along with James Madison and a couple other people. One of the papers, known as Federalist 51, and Federalist 51 outlined checks and balances. And checks and balances, how you define that is, obviously we have 3 branches in our government, the legislation, the judiciary, and the executive. Each branch of government has these checks to make sure that one part of the government is not abusing their power and becoming too much powerful over the other branches of government. Each branch of government needs to have equal power to ensure that we have our freedoms and our freedoms are protected. Because the founding fathers, when they helped found America, they were scared of a word called tyranny. Tyranny was, they were escaping that from England. They don't want a monarchy. They want the people to run the government. They want separation of powers. They don't want an overarching governmental power telling them what to do all the time. So that was their main focus. They created the Supreme Court to make sure that these laws are protected and that their Bill of Rights are protected, freedom of speech, Second Amendment. All these laws, the Supreme Court has to make sure when a law is passed, it goes to them, and they have to make sure that not only does it follow the Constitution, but it will affect everyone equally. So laws that are passed cannot, let me put this in words, hold on. Laws that are passed cannot affect people differently. Like, let's say, perfect example, Jim Crow, back in the day. Supreme Court that should have never passed that, because it does not apply fairly to every person. Obviously, there was segregation. It was awful. And the Supreme Court should have shot that down immediately. But I digress. So, Alexander Hamilton, Federalist 51, checks and balances, made sure that no governmental power became too tyrannical and too powerful over the others. In his checks and balances statement, the Supreme Court is to make sure that every law is constitutional, as I said before. And he said in that statement that the Supreme Court is the least tyrannical body because it's supposed to be apolitical. It's going to be the least tyrannical, and therefore we can appoint judges for life. One of the checks and balances that the executive has over the judiciary is that the executive, the president, is the one who appoints these judges. And the thought was, if you're going to appoint judges for life, then you have to make sure they're qualified. You have to make sure that they know what they're doing, they know the laws, they're going to apply them fairly, and that is one of the checks and balances the executive has over the judiciary, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can shoot down any law that is passed by the executive or legislation as unconstitutional. If it's unconstitutional, will not get passed. So, obviously, this is very important. What's going on today is the Democrats are pushing legislation to expand the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, to my knowledge, has been at 9 judges. 9 judges let me think of the date. It's been like 1860 something. It's been at like 9 judges. 9 judges on the Supreme Court total. If someone steps down or passes away, it is the president's duty to appoint a new judge and uphold that number of 9. And back in, I want to say, maybe it was Roosevelt's third. No. It was probably his second term, but he was hitting a bunch of roadblocks. Franklin D. Roosevelt. He was hitting a bunch of roadblocks, and he thought maybe it would be a good idea if I expanded the Supreme Court, because sometimes they were denouncing my laws as unconstitutional. So Franklin D. Roosevelt tried to push a bill forward that would expand the Supreme Court to 15 judges. And the amount of backlash he got from not just the Republicans, because he was a Democrat, not just the Republicans, the Democrats fired back. Both parties fired back at him and said, you cannot do this. You're messing with fire, and you will be accepting the consequences for this. And the consequences could be dire. So what's happening today is Democrats are trying to push a bill to expand the Supreme Court. Now, let's think back to the debates between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden was asked this question several times, if he would pack the Supreme Court, if he would expand the court. He blew off every question. Eventually, he did answer it once, and he said he was not going to do it. But we know that's a lie. So now there's legislation being put forward to expand the court by 4 judges. Right now there's 9. That would put it to 13. And that would have very, very drastic consequences. Now let's take a look at those consequences. The Supreme Court is supposed to be apolitical, according to Alexander Hamilton and much of our founding fathers. But what's the motivation to expand the Supreme Court? Well, I mean, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt did it back in the day, or tried to do it back in the day, he wanted to make his laws pass easier. That, in and of itself, was a political motivated act. This, today, is a political motivated act. And the Supreme Court is supposed to stay apolitical. It's not supposed to be a political body. So if Joe Biden wants to expand the court by 4 justices, that would upset the balance. What's to say when the Republicans get office that they want to expand the court by, let's say, another 5 judges? So now, if Joe Biden expands it to 13, Republicans get office, and they want to expand it by 5. Now, all of a sudden, we got 18 judges. And there's a problem with that. The problem is, those judges appointed will have political motivations because they're getting appointed not by the traditional way that has been done for hundreds of years. Joe Biden's obviously going to, if this passes, Joe Biden would obviously appoint judges that do have political motivations. And if Republicans were to do this too, they would have political motivations. And there's a very big problem with that, because that would affect what laws are passed, what laws are not passed, and honestly, that would drastically change our future. There is little to no backlash to this act. There is little to no backlash from the Democratic side. Republicans are flaming. They're like, whoa, this cannot happen. As they should. But the Democrats were not seeing it. And it really should be both parties saying something. Now, I don't care if you're a Democrat and I'm a Republican, or I'm a Democrat and you're a Republican. We should both see that this is wrong. Because the Supreme Court is an apolitical body, but if we politicize it, according to Alexander Hamilton, it will be the one body that becomes tyrannical. Going back to that word tyrannical. This is the easiest way to corrupt our government. Obviously. If we start politicizing the Supreme Court, it's going to upset our checks and balances. And that's not right. So, what they're also going to try to do is, right now they're talking about adding more states. So, while Joe Biden and the Democrats, they're going to try to expand the Supreme Court, they're also going to try to add states. D.C. being one of them, and there's talk of Puerto Rico, but we don't know yet. D.C. is really the main focus right now. Now, what's the motivation for that, you might ask? Well, I mean, if you add more states, you add more senators, and you add more House of Representatives of the House. So now you possibly have 4 more Democratic judges going into the Supreme Court, and you have 2 more Democratic senators going in, and you have, however, I don't know how to calculate the House of Representatives, how many DC would get. But again, it's a power grab. Power corrupts. It's a power grab. This is all politically motivated, and we can see this. But there should be more outrage on the Democratic side, and there's not. And there's not. And I do have some Republican views. I have some Democratic views. But this should not be, oh, the Democrats are expanding the court. Well, I'm a Democrat, so I support it. Shouldn't be like that. Or it shouldn't be like, oh, I'm a Republican, Democrats are trying to expand the court. I'm not going to support it because I'm a Republican. It shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be like that at all. Look at the facts. Look at the circumstance. This is not a good move. And there should, and in my opinion, there should be more backlash. There really should. And I hate how everything is along party lines now. Everything is along party lines. If you're a Republican, I have to support this guy because, he's Republican. Or if I'm a Democrat, I got to support them because I'm a Democrat. No. It's not how it should work. Look at the facts and form your own opinions. There's such a divide nowadays between Republicans and Democrats, and it should not be that way. And we should look at the facts that the Supreme Court being packed is not a good idea. It will upset the balance of checks and balances, and it will offshoot the power that the federal government has had for hundreds of years. Because what's to stop the Republicans when they take office from expanding the Supreme Court a little bit more? What's to stop them? Thank you for watching Glenn Talks podcast. I'll see you guys later.